Welcome to the Income Rebellion podcast. Today I am joined by special guest Miriam Tinberg. Miriam is fueled by curiosity, big ideas, and works to shed a light on and add complexity to powerful cultural dynamics that shape our human experience today. Miriam is a digital curator, conversation facilitator, and community builder. She is well known by the community she created on TikTok and the conversation club that she leads called No Small Talk. During this call, I do something different from the other guests I tend to have on this show because I basically give Miriam a one-on-one professional liberation breakthrough session. And if you're not familiar with what the professional liberation breakthrough session is, these sessions are for people who really want to do work that they love, really want to tap into purpose, really want to have some ease and joy and flexibility in the ways that they may work, but they may not really know how to do that. And this call is really powerful because it begins with me giving you a self-audit for your career and then me going down an entire wormhole of your professional history so that when we come together on this 90-minute call, I am able to clearly articulate your purpose, and together we're able to refine that and also turn it into an income stream that can last you for the rest of your life and your legacy. And this is what we do today on this call together. You're going to find that for the first part of the call, it's really me getting an understanding of how Miriam sees her work. And then we're going to dive into some really juicy business strategy, some really juicy conversations around limiting beliefs on finances, on business structure, on serving community in a way that aligns your values, but that can also pay your bills. And we're going to turn all of that into a business model that's going to be able to sustain Miriam for as long as she would like to, maybe even the rest of her life. So I hope that you enjoy this episode, and if you do, and if you want to have your own breakthrough session, or if you'd like to work with Miriam, all of that information is going to be in the show notes, so you can plug into it whenever you like. All right, I hope that you enjoyed today's session, and I'll talk to you soon. First off, Miriam, thank you so much for being willing to share some of your own career journey with the folks who listen to this podcast, with this incredible community that we have here. I would love to learn a little bit more about what your hopes are professionally right now.
Ooh. My hopes professionally are really to be able to sustain myself financially and only do things that light me up creatively in that process. Um, to have a flexible schedule and be able to control my own time, and do creatively interesting things. And I think some of those pieces can happen, but that mix of all of them, I think, is what I'm hoping for, to support myself financially, but also not be beholden to things that don't feel right. Kind of just the
Mm.
abundance of all of it.
And what do you think that it feels like when the career feels right?
You know, I feel that I'm starting to feel that now this year. Um, I've had moments of it in jobs in the past. I think what has become really clear to me, and we can get into it, but basically, I quit my full time job earlier this year. And so have been cobbling together this really interesting TikTok, like, social media thing over the last 10 months. And I'm able to think about what feels really good. And there is this sense of um, not feeling afraid of making mistakes. And
Mm-mm.
you are hard pressed to find that in a workplace where there's all these systems and limitations and blockers and hierarchies. If a boss is really good, you can get that little snippets of sort of autonomy and freedom and ability to experiment, but it's much more difficult in the confines of a traditional workplace. So what I've been loving about this year is that I get to test stuff out, and try things. And if it doesn't work, it's okay. And no one's impacted but me. And that freedom feels very, very different than anything I've experienced before.
Mm. It's so beautiful that you've been able to give yourself this space to really deeply explore what you're interested in and to begin trying things out, being unafraid to fail, putting yourself out there in new and interesting ways. I'm
Yeah.
curious to first hear. I'm curious about the experiments that you've been making, but I'm also curious about what inspired you to start posting on TikTok and sharing some of your insights with the world.
Yeah, it's really I feel very grateful for how I started, which I'm just really coming to understand is, a quality I have, which is sort of I started one day because I needed to just share about a podcast episode that I was listening to. Ironically, it was about
Mm,
work and it was specifically about moral injury at work. Highly recommend this episode to people. It's the Ezra Klein Show. Work Won't Love You Back is the episode name. So I was like, oh
mm,
my God, this is applicable to people. This idea that you can be morally injured through your job, that your expectations in your nonprofit or in whatever can be so misaligned with reality that you feel these burnout symptoms, but it's really a moral injury. So, anyway, I was like,
mm,
I have this compulsion to give other people this podcast episode. And so I had no public social media before that. I was just very like posting my own stuff, but I have always been a really curious person. I read a ton, I listen to a ton of podcasts, and I'm an external processor in general, I've realized. So things sink in for me. They always have in a class, in a book club, talking out loud about it. Whereas I know some people do the processing internally before they share. So it was that sort
mm,
of like amalgamation of listening to interesting stuff and also wanting to talk out loud about it that sort of propelled me to make that first video. And then I just kept going. And it wasn't necessarily because I think that video did well. I think when it hit 5K views, I was losing my mind, and then it hit 10K, and I just like went up from there. I could not believe it. And I even found an Instagram story I did like the next day of, should I quit my full-time job? I have 30 Instagram or 30 TikTok followers. Should I do it? And I joked that was January 2022. And so I just kept going.
mm,
Because I saw it was really people's comments, and oh my God, I relate. And this is fascinating. Thank you for sending it. That made me sort of understand the value of, oh, let me keep talking about this stuff. And then almost 3 years later, I still, it's become obviously more complicated with a following and notifications and the dopamine of this and that. But I really try at the end of the day to remember the reason why I started posting and why I find the platform so compelling, which is to share and talk about the things that provoke more questions in me. And so, yeah, that's the reason, and that it still is the thing that I think for the most part motivates me today, which is a really cool thing and is very sustainable when you think about it. Like I'll never run out of things that I am reading and listening to, and I'll never run out of questions and curiosities.
Honestly, it's incredible that you're able to create a foundation, build momentum on it, and to really keep going. But I think what really intrigued me about what you said is that one of the more powerful things that you've gotten from this experience was the ability to connect with people in new and interesting ways. Can you share more about what that connection looks like and what you enjoy about it, most importantly?
Yeah, there are definitely limitations to that. And that's sort of where I'm at right now, is figuring out how can I take these little nuggets of connection, these little the buds of connection that I've started, and deepen them, because TikTok is ultimately, in any of these platforms, kind of a one-way street. I determine what we talk about. I post the video and start the conversation. I get to decide if I want to respond to comments or not. So I've become a little bit like, oh, I have a desire for more of a two-way street, more of an
Mm,
interaction. But I will say it has been really satisfying, even with all of that said, to build a group of people that follow me because they're drawn towards the things that I talk about. And so it does feel like I'm definitely not naive. I understand it's not really a community. I don't really facilitate the people who follow me talking to each other, but there's this feeling that the people for whom the video resonates, like they're gonna be my people and they're gonna be each other's people. And that's really been proven true when I've met um, like people in real life that I've met on TikTok.
mm,
And they are exactly as I would expect them to be. And I mean, every single time it's been like a slam dunk in terms of connecting in real life. And that's not a
mm,
coincidence. Like the algorithm is at play for sure. But there is a sense of, you immediately know if you're going to skip my video or if you're going to save it or want to talk about it or whatever. And so I think people get a lot of solace from finding their people, quote unquote. And also there's a lot of value just in the comment sections of my videos, I think. Like, I get overwhelmed with the comments and I often don't respond, but just reading through them, skimming through, I think there's so much good conversation and the sense of we're not alone, or you do that too, or I don't agree with you. Like, I find that really valuable. And I've heard from a lot of people that they do as well. So taking it to the next level of how can we meet in real life? How can we feel more like a collective or community? That's kind of, I think, the challenge that I'm interested in exploring next year.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I do feel like I've built something. There is some level of shared experience and shared brains and shared perspectives from the people that follow me. That's really satisfying.
Mm. I also want to say too, just as someone else who posts random stuff online and then meets these strangers and then builds relationships with these people, like I honestly believe that even though social media can feel so silly, you are creating a real community with real values and a
Yeah,
real pulse. And you do meet people, and these are people that really do have the same values, interests, passions, perspectives as you do. And it's kind of surreal and a little bit creepy because it can be done in
agreed.
such a parasocial way. But I really want to just say that you have created a community and people have found a space where they can communicate openly and honestly through your platform. If you haven't seen Miriam's content, for the people who are listening, it's absolutely incredible. You should definitely check it out. But I believe that people are finding a sense of home and safety in the spaces that you're already virtually creating.
Yeah.
And so I think this next chapter is a conversation on what does it mean to expand community in a thoughtful and real way? And how can that happen in a way that honors your lifestyle and livelihood needs, honors your capacity, and also still creates a powerful, valuable experience for the people who partake in these conversations. Does
Yeah.
that resonate for you?
It absolutely does. And, I'm of two minds where I think what you said about that honors my capacity, all that stuff, that is where some of my reticence comes in expanding this community, because I'm really trying to sort of confront within myself and in filling out your values worksheet. One of the things that I said is my values now is flexibility. So how can I be experimental, as I was discussing, be creative, try things out, say, I'm starting a Patreon, I'm starting a book club, I'm starting an in real life thing, while also allowing myself to say, this is stressful, or this has become dreadful, or I'm not loving this, and then pivot. And obviously it's complicated when people are involved in that, and I want to be responsible as the arbiter of this community, and I want to be experimental. And so figuring out what that balance is definitely going to be a challenge. And so I've been thinking about going on TikTok live, which I've never done, or Instagram live or whatever, and just kind of asking people their opinions and explaining all of that, and like, what's a low lift way that would make you feel connected, and how much would you pay for said thing? And I mean, we can talk about money, that's a whole other thing. But and the impulse is, I think for many of us, like, I think it's natural, the natural sort of mode is scale, 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 build it up, get as many followers, get as many whatever, make X amount of dollars. And what does it look like if I don't scale at that rate?
Mhm.
If I do a community that's 10 people? And I mean, I'm already doing that with my conversation club here, no small talk, which we could get into, but how do I'm realizing that in order to live out the values of flexibility, autonomy, creativity, um, slowness, I will inherently have smaller communities, smaller groups, like, and figuring out what that balance is between continuing to have momentum, but also honoring my capacity and going slow and steady instead of all in, even as I have the energy, because I will then quickly dread it. So I think that's a
Yeah.
dance I haven't quite figured out yet, and I'm looking forward to exploring. And I think one way to do that is being transparent, like showing work in progress. That is one of my values. I have like a values doc on my phone, and one of them is show work in progress early and often. And I did that when I was at full-time jobs the last couple of years, like share the doc with the person when you've just started it instead of when it's completed. And so how can I do that with community building online? How
Mm.
can I try stuff and talk about that process? And if it doesn't work, end it. And like all that stuff feels, I know it's not actually high stakes, but it feels like I feel a responsibility as the person who would be gathering people to be intentional about it, but not so intentional that I stop myself from trying, you know?
Mhm. Well, I think that one thing that I would really want to prioritize for you is to get a clear understanding on why people find the spaces you offer valuable already, because you're not starting from zero. You already have the foundation of an incredible community. And communities, like the difference between a community and a business is that people give you recognition through attention and money versus just attention, which is what you're already doing. And so that doesn't have to be, I think that when we think about starting a business, we put this all on a pedestal of how can I get the most money the fastest and launch and
Yeah.
scale in capitalism, right? But I think that at the end of the day, you already have a group of people. And so now you have to understand one, why they like the work that you do, why they appreciate you as a facilitator and as a leader already. And then two, how you want to invite them into containers to really build on that foundation that you already have. So let's talk through what that looks like. If that, well, first, does that sound aligned to you?
Absolutely, yeah, and I think the containers part is really interesting to me, like, what could those look like and how to invite them, and yeah, yes, I'm there.
Awesome. So, what do you think right now is something that people get from interacting with your world that they otherwise wouldn't get?
I think, 1, access to diverse material. I think
Mhm.
I'm naturally really suited. I have a very specific taste, and I've seen that as a skill set or an expertise that TikTok has allowed me to understand that not everyone possesses this. And so I am naturally tapped into a lot of journalists, authors, publications, genres, podcasts, this and that. Like I am constantly consuming and talking about different kinds of stuff. And so
Mhm.
I've really grown to see the value of being a generalist. People often get niches and you'll get the work conversations or you'll get the lifestyle, whatever. And I think part of the appeal for people is that they kind of don't know what I'm going to post next. And it's often topics or publications or whatever that are surprising. Like someone said, it's really interesting that you post these legacy news publications, but then we'll also post Dirt, which is an internet commentary site or random podcasts, like it's really unexpected. And I think that is part of my bread and butter. So I think giving people access to diverse, interesting information and conversations that they wouldn't otherwise have is definitely something that I am uniquely skilled at doing. And then I think the second is kind of the ability to explore, reflect, interrogate, be thoughtful in my questions because a lot of what I do is not giving strong opinions. And I've had a lot of sort of insecurity about needing to have a strong opinion because the internet will sort of require you to be very loud about your opinions. And one of the things that is most interesting to me is open-ended questions that force people to kind of sit with their stuff. And I know you do this all the time. This is your bread and butter as well. Like, and it doesn't mean you don't have opinions, but it means that you are like interested in bringing in other people's questions or interrogating why do I believe what I believe and where does this come from and might I want to change this and sort of just like helping facilitate and giving space for questioning to no end other than exploration. And I, often will just ask questions at the beginning or end of my videos. I will not I'm not interested in conveying that I am an expert on anything, or requiring that people show up as experts. So I think those are the two main things, giving space and giving knowledge, information.
I think that we have this kind of culture where you kind of have to, you're expected to know everything up front and you're expected to have an answer up front. And you're also, especially for, you know, femme body, like people who are women, like you're expected as well to appease those around you and to please those around you in what you're saying, what you're doing. One thing that I would say that you do uniquely is I believe that you also create a space for people to explore the nuance within themselves
Yeah.
and to come out of looking into themselves with a new degree of clarity and a new degree of confidence that they may otherwise not be able to explore. For example, if someone asks you, hey, do you want to buy a hot dog? Hey, buy this hot dog, buy this hot dog, buy this hot dog. You're going to feel pressured to say yes.
Yep.
But I think if someone says, hey, there's hot dogs for sale here, you'll have the opportunity to say, hey, yeah, I want to buy that hot dog, or actually, no, I'm good. I'm going to go get a hamburger, right? Like, this is a silly example of that, but I
Yeah,
think
no,
that
totally.
your work gives people enough space to breathe because you don't have an expectation on what they should become or what they could become.
Ooh, I'm writing this down. And in fact, it's really interesting. Like I have just it's very that's why um I don't take personally many of the negative comments like we all get negative comments, and so people will be annoying to me sometimes in the comments, and I don't take it personally because I can usually tell that it's someone that I have triggered someone through some kind of conversation, particularly on the videos that are contentious, like when I talk about friend envy and how I have a friend where we talk about our envy of the other as it comes up. Like we live very different, divergent lives. And sometimes we sort of like emotionally upset the other one just by sending a picture or just by talking about a partner
Mhm.
or whatever. And so she and I have really spent a lot of time talking about that stuff because we're interested in this reflection. But a lot of people haven't. And so a lot of and are like scared to do that work.
Mhm.
And I know that that's sort of what you do as well, teasing that out of people. But it's a process. And so most of the mean comments are people who haven't done that work and are scared to dive in. And
Mhm.
I've hit some sort of trigger for them, and they're going to project it back onto me. And so it's very interesting to see the difference between people who are just projecting their stuff back onto me and people who are willing to sit in it. Um,
Mhm.
and rarely are people actually saying something mean about me. They're just sort of showing their fear around having to admit they don't know why they believe what they believe, or that they're dissatisfied with something that they do or think in their day-to-day life. So I appreciate that. And I think that people who follow me, who are actually listening to the questions that I ask them, really appreciate that all I'm interested in is sort of like pushing people to ask themselves these questions. And if I see myself almost like an arbiter of like a convener of the questions, that I just like pull it out and present it to them. Like you said, this sort of like, there are hot dogs, or are you interested in a hot dog? Like, some sort of phrasing of a question that requires them to say, am I interested in a hot dog, or do I want a hamburger? And I feel like that moment of sort of, am I? Why do I? Like, whatever, those kinds of questions. I love that stuff. And you can just tell when people hate it and when people are like curious. And I get everything across the spectrum. And so it's just interesting to see that stuff laid bare in the comments. And um, I want to do it more. Like, I want to keep almost pushing the buttons in that way, because I can tell that the ones who are interested, or at least a little bit curious, or they stay with it, and they like, I don't know. So there's just like a lot of good stuff in there, and I can see that that has become my role, and I really enjoy it.
I think too, like, well, I want to speak a little bit to the trigger piece because I feel like this comes up in my work all the time. To your point, people do get triggered a lot when I post things because I don't believe people give themselves permission to explore what freedom means, and they have this understanding. I sometimes get in my videos, people are like, "Oh, well, I realize that being a real adult means doing this,"
Yeah.
and I always have to laugh at that because that's your interpretation of adulthood. And usually I say, hey, you can have that opinion. I'm not going to change your opinion. If you're happy, you're happy. But if you're happy, why are you yelling at me in my comments? Because I don't care. But if you care, then we should have a conversation, or we don't have to. I'm going to still do what I'm doing. And you're welcome to do what you like to do as well. So I feel like there's a lot that we touched on here, and I think that two of the things that sounds like they really kind of are alive for you right now is continuing this passion of finding really interesting things to talk about and bringing them into your world, into your audience. And then the second thing is having really dynamic and critical conversations around these pieces that go past the, you know, hate comment, initial reaction moments, but they allow people to kind of sit with these ideas and to let them simmer. You've also
Absolutely.
mentioned just in terms of how you prefer to work, that there can be kind of one income stream, one part of your business that really focuses on carrying people through a longer journey of exploration, understanding, and learning. But then also you have other pieces that can be more ad hoc, that are maybe more, jump in, join, and then we can conclude this. It doesn't have to be forever. It can be maybe for 3 days, one day, a week, whatever time span you want it to be under, but having a more kind of jump in, jump out way of
Yeah.
engaging with people. Do both
Yeah.
of those things help they serve your mission?
Definitely, and I think the jump in, jump out is really interesting. I again, going back to the capacity thing, like, how can I create a sustainable program, community, whatever, that is both not dreadful for me, because that's often the emotion that I feel. I don't even know if dread is an emotion, but, like, the thing that I feel when I've committed to something that I now feel stressed about, I start to dread it. And so, how can I protect my peace in that way, while also committing to a thing. Like, I want to be able to, I really am interested in having these deeper conversations. And so this idea of maybe we have one stream that is this longer membership that is limited to X number of people, like a manageable amount if I'm the one facilitating it. Or we say 3 months and you have to commit the whole time, right? It doesn't have to be ongoing forever necessarily. And then these other, what are some other offerings that could be pop in, pop out that feel more than um, my free TikTok, that are just like, kind of these ad hoc videos that I post. What are other ways where I can put them behind a paywall to create some sort of business for myself that are different gradations of commitment, both for me and for others? I think that feels like the right kind of um, programming that I'm interested in exploring.
Absolutely. And one thing that I really like to do is bring this work back to the mission that you hope to address in this period of your life and what it means for you to powerfully serve in that mission. And so it sounds like the powerful mission is to create these spaces of critical dialogue and to also continue your own ever growing expansion and ever growing curiosity, right?
Yep.
Are there other things that you would add to that mission?
I think having it feel less, like, having it be more two-way street, like, not feeling like I am the leader. Like, maybe I'm the convener or the gatherer, but that the thing is sustaining outside of me. And I think that would also help quell some of the dread if there was a group that was holding each other accountable outside of me doing all the work. That I think is, I don't know if that relates to the same, the two things that you mentioned, but I think that that is an important component, is creating some sort of questioning community of interested, curious, introspective people who also feel accountable and responsible for each other.
I think that that's a really powerful space. So I'm happy to go. We can dive straight into strategy. We can rattle off ideas back and forth of what this can look like. Or if you have a different type of question or direction you'd like to take this, we can go that way. Do you have a preference?
Let's do strategy.
Cool. So, what do you think is your biggest hurdle right now when it comes to strategy?
I think figuring out what is the most valuable, most sustainable path forward, because there are so many tools and platforms. For example, I could do some sort of Patreon. And that does have different tiers of membership. So it could be $3 a month to get some sort of like pop in, pop out thing from me, $5, $10 to get a, private, whatever kind of book clubby thing. So there's that, there's Substack, there's sort of the platforms, which platform, Instagram subscribers, TikTok subscribers, there's that. And then there's, what do I want to do on and with it? And I think I'm overwhelmed by the amount of stuff that I could do. And like I said earlier, I also want to, and I think how I talk about this, if I do make something, will be very important too, of this is a pilot. We're going to test this out. We're going to see. I want to be experimental. So I want to work with people to say, this isn't the right format. Can we adjust it to, like, I'm very, very open, and agility is one of um, my values as well. Like, let's pivot. I'm not married to anything. So I know I'm blocking my own ability to just go for it by almost over planning, overthinking it. Um, but there's, I think, the abundance of tools and things I could do makes me stop before I start. And so thinking through what is a low hanging fruit way to test this out and put things behind a paywall. I mean, then I have the whole other thing, which is less tactical and is more about, what is the value that I am bringing to people that is worth people paying for? How much is it worth paying for? And all of that, sort of the emotions behind charging for something that is just me, that I have given away for free for 3 years. And that is the more emotional thing that I'm able to articulate and that I'm interested in pushing through. So that is definitely uncomfortable, but I've gotten more comfortable with the idea of charging for this stuff. Um, but it's still there, that discomfort. So the mix of what do I do tactically and practically, and also what's the right amount to value myself. And I think both of those answers might come from asking my community about that. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of questions in there about what to actually do, like an overwhelm over all the options.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing that I will say is what sounds like the most important parts of this conversation are the parts of understanding your value and understanding how you can best translate that value to others. The platforms, the like technology, people can spend years. I've worked with clients who have spent months on a website before coming to coach with me, and they're like, "Oh, I don't know why my business isn't successful." And I'm like, "Yeah, because you spent months on the website and talking about where you want to put a course
Yeah.
instead of
Yeah.
talking to people and also
What's the
connecting with
point of the
yourself
course? Yeah.
exactly on what value you hope to bring forward. And so I think that the beautiful thing about starting a values aligned business that's community centered is that you can always iterate on different projects depending on what people need and how people are responding. Now, with that said, and this is my controversial opinion, but I think that it doesn't really serve community well to go into these conversations without a little bit of structure and guidance, particularly around pricing, because you know how much money you will need to receive to feel good about the work that you're doing and to feel confident and comfortable and financially sustained by the work that you're doing. And so asking community, hey, how much should I price this when you already have a number in mind? Because we talked about this offline. We don't have to bring that here if you don't want to.
Yeah.
But like, if you already have a number in mind, you're setting your community up to disappoint you because everyone's going to say, "Hey, this
Oh,
has been
true.
free for so long," you know.
I guess
And so,
my gut reaction to this, sorry to interrupt you just before I forget,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah.
that, like, my limiting belief around this is, oh, I assume I'm not going to be making the actual money I need to make off of this thing. I assume this is just going to be
Ooh,
part of it. So the idea that you're like,
ooh,
you know how much money you need to live, to pay your bills. And I'm like, oh, I was not assuming I would make that from this initiative.
ooh.
So that's interesting.
Okay, wait, let's talk about that. Why
Let's
do
say,
you believe?
I live in
Well,
LA and I have,
yeah.
expensive rent and I have car debt. So let's assume I need, first of all, I was paid in my last job more than I have realized. And I think we talked about this in our first call, that I was paid more than I actually needed. I was paid 115,000. And I think I probably need, quote unquote, to have all of my expenses, like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, to have all that met and continue my lifestyle of, I get drinks out, I get dinner, I travel. Not crazy, but I want to not have to worry about that stuff. 90K, let's say, right? I haven't actually crunched the numbers, but let's say it's 90K. I cannot imagine that I could create, like, this is where my brain goes when you talk about this, that I could create
Mhm.
some sort of Patreon, book club, Substack, whatever it is, that would give me 90K. I assume it would give me 10K. And then I would find other things to fill in the gaps. but if my value is this sort of like flexibility, free time, the idea that I could bang out that money in one job is a wild concept to me. And I obviously I'm not like I understand that you in order to make something like 90K off of Patreon, like that is just most people don't do that, right? Like you need to be famous. But the idea that this could make more than I am like I'm just lowballing it. I can feel myself assuming. I mean, even the way I talk about it, I could charge yeah, because this is a whole other a value of access. If access and inclusion is really and equity is really important to me, I also don't want to charge someone $20 a month right now. That's so expensive. So my gut is to be like $2 a month. And so how to balance all of these things of getting fair quote unquote value or payment and also making it open. Yeah, there's a lot in there that sort of is forcing me to confront the fact that I assumed I would not make money off of this venture,
Mm.
which is kind of crazy.
Okay, so let's talk about that because there is no reason why you can't make money off of your TikTok. Like I literally opened up TikTok while you were talking. Sorry if you heard it, but I looked at your account. You have 102,000 followers. If everyone gave you $1 one time a year, you would be making your salary back. Right? Like you have 9.9 million likes. If a tenth of people gave you $1,
A year, not even a day, a
a
month.
year. Exactly. So like let's just squash those limiting beliefs. I think the second limiting belief is just I think that you do not understand the value that you're giving people. And because of that, it's hard for you to put a number on it, where you're not understanding the way that people have actually been shaped and impacted by your work. And when you actually hear what people are saying about how you have helped them and how you have shaped them, people spend hundreds of dollars a week to go to therapy when
Yeah.
really they need community, right? So yes, it feels strange to charge for that, but at the same time, no one else is creating these community spaces that our society so desperately needs. And that's just a gap. And we live in capitalism, and this doesn't have to be extractive. I'm not saying you charge high ticket for a week to talk, a week long event or whatever, but no one else is going to create these spaces or else they would have already. And so part of owning this as a business and owning this as something that you have an income and a lifestyle off of is an understanding the fact that not only are we not exposed to the information to have conversations that expand our own individual growth, but we also do not have the skills or the spaces to try out community building in new and unique ways.
Yeah.
And that's what you're offering people.
So
And
like
so
that's interesting. Like
taking like a step back, let's talk about how valuable that community is to other people. So if someone did not have a community space, what would that do to their lives? How would that impact them emotionally, mentally, socially, financially?
yeah. I mean, it's interesting even you saying that a space to explore, a space to reflect that like my whole sort of experimentation outlook could actually be embedded into the purpose and value of the space is interesting. Like it doesn't need to be overly curated or crafted. People might just be thirsty for space to play. Um, that's interesting. And yeah, I mean, I think it's very clear I'm very, very aware of, the loneliness epidemic at a high level, but just how I feel it in my own life. I live in LA. It's very hard to find community. I have a lot of disparate friends, both in LA and out, and I spend a lot of time catching up on the phone. And I feel, the irony of feeling like I have people and also feeling lonely because distance is far, and even in LA you got to drive 30 minutes for a 2-hour coffee, whatever it is. And so I'm aware of that in my own life, and I see just in the comments from people that having someone who like gives them space to explore themselves and see themselves reflected back in comment sections like is incredibly valuable. And I think what's interesting to me is, like you said, I 100% agree with you that I think the reason why I'm reticent to put money on this or that is because even as I see people's comments and I'm able to speak to the ways that I think people value me, something isn't clicking in my brain of like, that's a real value. Like I sort of like am like, ah, you know? And I think part of the undervaluing is that it's not particularly effortful for me. And I've made a TikTok about this before. Like, because it comes pretty easy for me to find this material, to talk about it ad nauseum, to churn out videos, to reply to someone's video, to speak succinctly in one take for the most part, to put out videos that are quote unquote authentic. Like I do very little prep and people are like, how are you? And I'm like, I don't think about that. And I feel comfortable in front of the camera, all these things. Because I see that as not difficult, I don't see it as valuable, which is insane when you think about it. It's like, so for me, valuable work is like, must be stressful, must be effortful, right? Like that's the binary in my head.
Yeah, and that's capitalist conditioning.
Yeah.
Like, what what does a system that doesn't want you to really deeply love yourself, because unhappy people buy things, what do? They create unrealistic working standards that are really hard for you mentally, physically, and emotionally. And if you don't fall into them, then you're not doing enough. Right? That's what that conditioning does. And so I name that because I think that, if someone grows up a multimillionaire and they have the entire house is plated in gold, if they see a gold bar, they're not going to care. But if they offer that gold bar to someone who doesn't have it, that person's going to really want that gold bar and will pay everything they have for that gold bar, right?
Yeah.
So I think that when I say like you really need to understand the value that you're bringing to people, it's because you I don't think that that you're emotionally connecting to what the absence of you is causing your community.
I think that's so right. That is so right. I feel that. And I guess I'm curious, what are, like, before I even think about the Patreon, the this and that, like, how can I emotionally connect to that? What I bring and what it would be like if I wasn't there. Like, what are the ways to tether myself more viscerally to that stuff? Is it to write it down? Is it because I get a lot of affirmation in these comments, and I do get that. Is it to really collect it all? I mean, I've kept a folder on my phone for the last 3 years of like nice TikTok things. And when people say nice comments or particularly striking things, I will, or when celebrities like my videos, I will screenshot it and put it in that folder. And so how can I facilitate it clicking more? I think that might be a first step, honestly.
So, what I actually think that would be the best path for you is to understand directionally where you would like to take your work a little bit, a tiny, tiny, tiny bit more. And that's because you're not really only asking about how your work is impacting them, you're asking about who they are right now and how you're able to help them by authentically being you. And that's a slightly different question. Because what I think you'll find is you're going to find people who are really hungry for community, people who feel bad because they don't have people in this life that they feel like can show up for them in their flawed human selves. And they may not feel like they have people they can show up for in the way that they can really bring all of this, TikTok, Instagram, emotional regulation skills forward in relationship with meaningfully. And so I think that that's the gap that you're filling. But until you hear from people, what does it actually mean to not have that gap? It's going to be hard to understand the value that you're bringing. And I also think that some of this is just in your natural curiosity and curating abilities. So, what does it mean for people to have a critical analysis on news in 2024? And how is that important? And what does it mean for people to be, people have this saying of like a thought daughter or like thought leader, right? Like, what does it mean for people to be able to build that as a skill set in ways that help makes their life more rich and more holistic, right? And so if you were to ask me those questions, and I can give you a whole script of questions you can ask. I think you should have this be like a one-on-one conversation with maybe 20 people that follow you, that are your like diehards right now. Um, and what I would recommend doing is in these conversations, like if you were to ask me these questions, I would say, yeah, when I moved to California by myself, I was more lonely than I ever was before. I was super like depressed. I really overworked. I didn't have people I could rely on. The idea of forming a community on my own felt exhausting because I didn't know anyone in the area and I was tired from work already and I didn't really know where my people would be. Like that's what I would say in that period of my life. So, and this isn't to shame that version of me or to like, speak, to paint this really sad picture because I felt like I was doing a lot of really positive things for my life at that time. At the same time, there were downfalls and there were consequences, and you are going to be providing a space for people to navigate the consequences of doing what they do, of, being willing to meaningfully engage with this world and this life.
Mm,
It may
okay.
not be as big as a pain story as mine. It may be something like, oh yeah, you're just fun to talk to. Like, and that's okay too. But it's important to understand if you really dive deep with people on what it means to not have community, what it means to not feel plugged into what's going on in the world around them, you're going to get some really powerful answers. And that's going to change the way that you carry yourself in showing up for your work.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I really like the idea of talking to my ride or dies. I like the people that always comment on my videos and taking a dozen or 20 people and asking them. And I think like what would be very helpful is sort of because the questions you're asking are very different that I normally ask myself. Like, how can I, like you said at one point, how can I help them by being authentically me? Or like, how have I helped them by being authentically me? And like, instead of just, what do you like about my content? Because that's not really the question. What space am I filling in your life? Or yeah, like thinking through that, the framing of that would be really interesting. And the way you keep framing it through the inverse of like, what does it mean to not have that? To not have whatever it is that I provide. And of course, my instinct when you say that is to be like, that sounds so self-righteous or self-aggrandizing to assume that they would miss me in my absence. Right. And so like how to not like this is not an exercise an ego and like bolstering my ego. It's an
No.
understanding and digging for my value. And sometimes I think that I conflate the two. Like I get stressed about making it about me, but it's not about me. And I don't want to sort of distance myself from the fact that this is my own skill set and my taste, and I have an expertise here, but to serve, there's an end to that. That's not the end. That's the means to the end. The end being to serve people, fill a need, build community, make people feel seen and understand themselves better. And I'm a tool to help them. So yeah,
Mm.
it's interesting. And I can feel my nervousness around being seen as like egocentric kind of coming up with this line of questioning. But then it's
Is
like
it
the real ones would not even, they wouldn't blink an eye. They would bat an eye at like, they would have answers to this. So I'm like, okay, this is my own thing that people wouldn't interpret it this way.
do you I have two questions for you, and I'm figuring out which one makes most sense to ask first. I think that my first question will be, you refer to yourself as a tool and a facilitator, but you're not referring to yourself as a leader in this space when you're leading in this space. So my question to you is, what comes up for you when I refer to you as a leader and I refer to you as have someone who has created a community? Where is that? Because I think that has to come to play with this ego conversation too.
It's such an astute observation. I Another thing I have on my values sheet is like avoid or anti unnecessary hierarchy. That I have been in so many jobs where people assert their leadership, assert their title, assert their positionality over someone just
Mm.
because, just to maintain a sense of hierarchy. And it manifests in like, don't CC that person on this email. They shouldn't get that info. Don't share this Google Doc with them. Don't. And then I've gotten in trouble or slapped on the wrist for so many times for being like, why would I not share this information with someone that I believe is going to need it? And I would like to collaborate with on this thing. And sort of like, if you can give me if there is a rational explanation, like of course I understand people don't need to know everything, and there are reasons why we, certain teams, why we have certain silos in a workplace, but I think I get stressed about creating. I think I see leadership as asserting power, not as guiding or something. And so, but I think you're right. I'm not naive. Like I know what I'm doing is powerful to people. And many people, I mean, I'm still struck when people comment on my TikTok of, I go and search your name every day. Someone said that recently and I was like, what the heck?
Oh.
That's crazy to me. And I haven't seen you on my FYP for so long. Or someone said, I save every single video of yours that comes up, but I know Miriam's going to make me go into it. And I don't want to go into it at 9 a.m. before work. So I'm just going to save it and look at it later. And like, it's very clear to me that I think people they almost see my stuff, my leadership qualities more than I do. I mean, they do, it's true. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
figuring out why I have such negative associations with leadership. But you're right. I use things like tool. I even said it multiple times in this conversation. I'm just an arbiter. I'm just a gatherer. And I think that probably is me undermining a skill set, because the second I claim a skill set, I feel like that's, who are you to claim that expertise? How do I continue to be, because it's like one of the things that is really important to me is, which I mentioned at the beginning, like continuing to have open conversation, like leading with humility and saying, I don't know about a lot of things, but I like to read about a lot of the things that I don't know and to ask myself questions about the things I don't know. So how do I keep that humility, that curiosity, while also adopting a leadership role? To me, I think I equate leadership with expertise, be it earned or manufactured or whatever. And like leading with humility. I don't know, like those things seem at odds, but they obviously aren't at odds. There are many leaders that are actually humble and open to learning and pivoting and whatever, but I have less, I've seen that far less. So I think I don't know what that looks like.
Yeah. So, I mean, as a society, we have so much cultural gunk around leadership and power, when the reality is we all have power. You can't run away from your power. You can't say, Chelsea, I don't have power. Like, it's you, you can ignore it and pretend it's not there. And usually when people do that, it creates more harm and violence. But, and I'm not saying that to like say that you are creating harm and violence right now. I'm just saying, just in general in the world. So you have power, you are holding a position of power in the platform that you've created yourself, because it requires power to create a platform for yourself. And
No, keep going. Yeah.
okay. And so I think it's a matter of, well, what does it mean to have this power in a way that makes myself better and makes the world better? And that's the conversation that is, holding all of your business, all of these offers you'd like to create, all of these spaces that you hope to build. And so it's important to spell that out really clearly, because people are coming to you right now saying, hey, Miriam, lead us, and, I think it's even more confusing because a whole big piece of your platform is understanding what is relevant in the world right now and bringing that together, when it can make it hard for you to realize that people see you as what's relevant in the world and prioritize that as a source to stay on top of information and what's going on. And so all of that is to say, like, what does it mean for you to hold power in a way that helps you feel true to yourself? And that's what heart-centered leadership is. And that is what the world needs now more than ever. And I can talk about this for like days because I have so many big feelings about this, but power doesn't mean you're not going to CC someone on an email. I literally gagged when you said that because it brought back some stuff.
I'm like, PTSD to the max with like
uh,
person. No, I know. But
yeah,
yeah, I mean, what you're saying is so interesting because, as you said, like not understanding your power can lead to harm and danger. I am very well aware of that. And it's
of
interesting.
course.
In that regard, I really understand my power in the negative. And I talk about this a lot on TikTok. I think about it so often, particularly around Israel-Palestine stuff, that it brought it up a lot for me of what responsibility, I think a lot about responsibility that I have in how I communicate, in what I talk about, in how I continue to fight for nuance when everything is trying to force us into a binary, and and I've learned the hard way about continuing to refine my rhetoric and the language I use. And I even talked about this in a TikTok like a couple of days ago about how one of the things that I've really learned is to always question who's missing, and understanding how to talk about things while also acknowledging that not everyone, it's impossible to gather everyone and cover everyone's bases. And it doesn't mean I shouldn't talk about something because people are missing, but what responsibility do I have to not endanger anyone or harm anyone, but also to acknowledge who's not there. And you could caveat that to the death, and you could like really err on the side of too scared to talk because you're scared of offending someone or excluding someone or whatever. But so it's like I'm aware of the power in that regard, but why do I not also see the power in the inverse of the ways that I am adding to people's life, that I am guiding people, bringing people along, teaching people? I only see it in the like how to not cause danger power side.
Mm.
Hmm.
I feel like there's a lot that I could dive into, and honestly, it's just bringing up so many feelings about election stuff, about like world stuff in general for me. And what I will say is, though I should probably make podcast episodes about these other things too. But anyways, what I will say is that like right now our society is at a place where we're finding the balance between authenticity and connection. And I think that in that conversation, so many people want to be on the right side of history, of truth, of knowledge by having the perfect takes at the perfect time so that people can read those takes at the perfect time and integrate them into life and da 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 da. Where the reality is a lot of people don't have perfect answers. A lot of people don't know things, which is okay to not know. A lot of people don't also know how to have conversations around these things without completely putting themselves either at risk or putting themselves, in this position where people expect them to know more than they know. And
Yeah.
so what I will say is like you are a human being, and your platform right now is really about diving into the conversations that illuminate the human experience, that allow people to find nuance and space in their own perspectives. And you can still take a stand on issues that are meaningful to you. You can still not take a stand if it is not meaningful to you. But what you do owe your people is your truth. And like your truth doesn't have to be what people want to hear, but also shouldn't be formed and fit into a box because that's something that's expected of you. Like particularly for you because your platform is about honoring everyone's truth to a certain degree. And of course, you have an audience that has a specific need and a specific perspective. But
Yep.
what it means to be a heart centered leader is to not mislead people. And I think that that's like what I've been speaking about a lot in this call, like around money. Like, hey, you have financial goals. Yeah, you can care about community, but like don't mislead people into thinking that you don't care about those things. Or, you can have different political stances, but like don't mislead people because you think your audience wants to hear something from you. You want people who want to be around you because you're you. And that's in all areas of life, but especially as a business that's a personal brand and you being yourself.
And in fact, one of the things that is most important to me that I think I've practiced from day one, but have gotten increasingly more comfortable on TikTok doing is like being loud about those values. And I think I've been loud from the beginning about what I don't know and feel very comfortable, our whole conversation of asking questions and learning more and curiosity. But there's fear around stating your values loud and proud. And that's been my issue with so many of my previous leaders at all levels, from my like direct supervisor all the way up to the top. And things like 2020 and George Floyd's death, or COVID, or diversity issues. Most managers are not transparent, they're not humble, they're not open, they're not explicit, they're not blah blah blah, like the list goes on. And I have really calcified my values in that regard towards leadership of be loud. If you don't know what to say, just say you don't know what to say. And so you encourage people to take the time they need to do what they need to do. Like you don't have to exactly strike the right balance on Israel Palestine or BLM or this and that. And I understand, although I am very cynical about like companies have certain lines, so blah blah blah, like whatever. But state that, be transparent about that ambiguity and that confusion, and I don't think it's weak leadership. I think it's strong leadership. And so that's all to say that I think specifically, post October 7th, I'm a Jewish person, and that and also I speak Arabic, and I feel like very connected to this issue. And that was the first experience where I really was tested publicly on this TikTok stage of, okay, you have these pretty clear values. Like I do not at all, I study Middle Eastern studies. That's what my BA is in. And I have still so much I don't understand about it. And there was I was confronted with the real tensions of I feel scared to say the wrong thing. And this is the real moment where my unique voice and experience, but also the way I approach ideas and conversations is valuable. And I want to say something. And like that compulsion to want to share and figuring out how to do that, it was definitely a give and take. And I had one conversation that really like messed me up with this one person that I was like, oh, I really could have done better. But so I'm not afraid of that. I mean, I am afraid, but I'm not afraid in the like getting canceled thing, but it is like figuring out how to maintain nuance, hold my ground when I do have strong opinions, and be confident when I don't have strong opinions but want to engage with it. And so it's funny that you then can compare that to the money thing of like asking for the money that I need to live, like, and being confident in that. And that, why does that feel so different? I think because it's attaching money to me as opposed to some sort of external event that does impact me, but isn't about me at my core. Whereas
Why
attachment,
I find this to be like the Gen Z millennial curse, where it's so much easier for us to advocate for literally everyone else in the world besides ourselves, besides what we need to survive. So you're not alone in that. And I think that, well, to the voice thing, it's really powerful that you are confident in sharing your voice around things that are important to you. Part of your work and part of your business is going to be carrying people through the mud and
mm,
being there as a resource for people who want to walk through the mud.
mm,
So your work isn't for everyone. It's not to have a hot take on an issue. It's not to, say XYZ is 100% wrong. It's to look at the empathy that is needed to have the critical conversation and then having the critical conversation. And that doesn't mean that you can't take a hard stance. I think it's important that you do. But
yes.
I think that at the same time, we can have the conversation, but there are more important parts of this conversation than other parts. And yeah, I'm being a little bit vague because we're not talking about anything specific,
Yeah.
super specific right now.
No, I think that's really helping sort of crystallize. Because, I talked to a friend recently about what I'm doing on TikTok, and I was like, I'm curating, collecting, and he goes, that's the how. That's not the why. That's not the to what end. And so thinking about what is it that I'm really accomplishing and working towards through this collection, curation, dissemination, making little videos. And it really is. I really like what you said about like carrying people through the mud. I think that is fascinating. And I'm particularly interested in that mud, in that gray area. And I mean, it's come up so many times with stuff that I've posted that has really triggered people. Like we were saying, I mean, I did a post a couple weeks ago about an Atlantic podcast series called We Live Here Now that was all about January 6thers and who moved into the neighborhood of these Atlantic journalists, like on their street, and sort of like them getting to understand their neighbors. And it was not an apologist, like a January 6th insurrectionist apologist series at all. And they were quite angry, these journalists, throughout the whole thing. But there was a level of humanization and just sort of seeing people's gut reactions when I talked about this series of like, why would I humanize these people that dehumanize me? And I so understand that. My goal was not to make, let's say, a Black person. Many Black people commented and were like, why would I listen to people that want to lynch me? And I understand that as a Jewish person too, although like obviously very different experiences. But so, and that was a real moment for me. Like, I am interested in diving into the gray area when I feel safe, when I don't feel safe. And I know that not everyone is, but some people are. And so, how can I not back down when it gets sticky and messy and maybe hurtful? Although hurt has a scale, like there are some things that I just will not approach, and I'm not interested in, quote, interrogating or investigating. But I've just realized that there is a lot of gray area that I'm interested in playing with, even if at the end of the day I say, oh no, I hate this. I want to understand. And so I, I think like seeing that I have this capacity for that and I have this appetite and interest for that mucky, like muddy gray area, and saying, if you too are interested in that, come along and I will guide you. Like that's a very hard thing to describe, but I kind of like, as I think about, what could a future community look like putting that explicitly in there as best I can, like attempting to articulate that feeling, that journey. I really think that that is one of my value adds. It's very intangible, like hard to explain.
Well, no, I actually think it's very tangible and very clear. I see one part of your work being building collective capacity to navigate ambiguity and change. And then I see the second part of your work being going through the mud on specific things. And that could be how to survive Thanksgiving dinner with with these family members that you absolutely do not want to be at the table with. Or it could be, if there is a big world event, how what do we do? Like, how do we navigate this? I don't want to, for the people who don't want to look away, for the people who want to show up in those spaces, for the people who want to have this be who first, what I'll say is this, for the people that these issues are so in their face that they can't ignore it, but they don't have the tool set to move through it in a way that aligns with their values, right? Like, that that's the meat of what you're doing. And these are two different types of spaces. Like, for some it could be, oh, maybe I'll look at friendship differently. And for others, which is still a big thing, I'm not like saying one
Yeah,
is less
no,
important
totally.
than another, like that can be itself a 6 month exploration, right? But or a year long, lifetime long explorations. But the other piece can be, okay, how do I navigate BLM when I hold multiple identities and I'm not directly impacted, but I want to care and show up well, right? Like, you can position yourself to speak on these things in an authentic way without expecting everyone to be at your table, but letting everyone know that, hey, if this table isn't for you, come back in 3 months, there'll be another table, or come back
Mm,
in XYZ time, there'll be another table.
interesting. So yeah, my reaction to that's fascinating. And my reaction is how like I've how do I position myself as an expert of like quote having hard conversations or diving into the muck while also feeling like I'm just figuring it out. How do I it is the constant thing that I feel of like I don't want to overemphasize an expertise while also acknowledging I do have some level of expertise, but I want to just facilitate a conversation. And that is sort of like how I structure it will matter, I think, like the kinds of material we choose, the kinds of questions I ask. So framing it not as you will learn how to have hard conversations, like that framing stresses me out. But if
Mhm.
you want like through, like figuring out what the right framing is that, but I can't tell if am I shirking my own expertise or am I opening the floor to
Yeah.
more ambiguity, like that's
So you already are an expert. And the fact that you have hesitations about your expertise on this makes you even more of an expert. Like I said, part of this is like leadership is creating the table. So you are creating the table, you're making sure everyone has these beautiful resource guides of information so that they can show up to this table as their best selves. You're having the conversation. If someone spills, wine on their tie, you're helping them navigate that conflict, navigate that moment of discomfort. You are celebrating when people find moments of joy and expansion and growth through these different periods and pivots. So all of that is a skill. And like, honestly, Miriam, I really want you to just take a moment and look at all of the hours you've spent towards creating content and just realize that all of that is adding to your expertise. When you look at education in these linear ways, when it's not linear, you're not going to find that skill set in a college curriculum. No one is going to be able to understand the nuance you bring to TikTok comments, which is literally the dredges of the internet sometimes.
oh, I know.
And like, and still be able to offer grace and keep your self-esteem and feel good about yourself in the world. Like, all of these things are skill sets. You already have the tools. You're applying them in a new context, which is a stretchy thing to do and is a new thing to do and is requires new skills to be learned, but they're not as far off from your base skill set as I think you might be seeing.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because I do feel a compulsion to share more about this process. I love talking about here's what I've learned from posting on TikTok here. I mean, I literally made a video last week about this exact thing we were talking about, the Atlantic podcast episode, negative comments, this idea of people projecting their own stuff into the negative comments, and just that processing is frankly more interesting to me than, the random articles I talk about. But I learn about that stuff through the posting of the articles, and then things come up, and through my own skill set I'm able to sort of reflect and decipher and synthesize, and then things emerge that I want to teach and talk about. And um, so it's interesting to think of how I could continue that work in a more formal structure where there is money attached and accountability. But I do think that I have a unique perspective that, you're right, has come, and I see it. I see TikTok as totally proof of concept of what I'm able to talk about and what I'm able to do. And I often feel limited in that format, in the product of, I want to do more. I have even more than I can talk about in a 3-minute video. I want to move around. I want, like all these things. I want to bring in different modalities, whatever. And so that's why I feel this pull to do more. It's not ultimately about the money. It's about like expanding beyond the platform. So
Well, I
yeah,
mean, but like Miriam, you already have convinced 108,000 people in this world to go deeper, probably
yeah,
more than that. So, like,
I know.
go deeper with them. Go deeper with them. Find the ones who want to go deeper and go deeper. Whatever's interesting to you, that's your next idea to test, right?
Yeah.
And that's what being a heart-centered business owner leader is. And that's now what you're free to do.
Yeah. God, it's so interesting. Oh my God, I've taken 2 pages of notes here. You've given me, like, it's just such an important reframe that you facilitated with me, that it when I figure this stuff out, like this, the leadership, what, like, what is my leadership, how can I show up as a leader here, not shy away from that. The expertise is in me talking about how I don't have an expertise, like all that stuff, then the thing will flow. And also, yeah, I don't know, there's like, so this is so fascinating, and it's just given me, it's very clear what I think my mental obstacles are around this. Yeah.
Yay. Okay, so we have a little bit of time left. What would you like to talk about? We can talk about specific ways to structure this. We can talk about the money piece. We can talk about anything else. But I think those were two pieces that were left a little bit unfinished.
Yeah, I think I'm interested in the money stuff, like how to both how to hold access and equity at the same time as, in this capitalist system, I quote, deserve, I'm producing something of value and deserve money, like all of that framing, and should get money, should, in quotes, all that stuff, get money for the work that I am putting in. Like that is a real blocker. And I think I have the binary in my head of money equals bad, free equals good, which is just not how it works. Um, so yeah, so I would love to talk through what could that actually look like.
Mm. So the way that I like to think about this is the fact that none of us decide to be in this late stage capitalistic system. Because we're in the system does not mean we need to have a life of suffering, a life of poverty, or a life of diminished lifestyle. Um, and at the same time, we do have a responsibility to each other, but that responsibility shouldn't come at the expense of ourselves, which means to me, if you cannot give it in a way that feels generous and expansive and like it's making your world bigger, then you cannot give it. So, right now, you already are doing a lot for the world for free. You have created a lot for the world for free. And if you would like to continue doing that, I think that that's a really good thing and a really necessary thing. And if you'd like to explore new ways of doing that, I think that's a really good and necessary thing. What I will say is that perhaps instead of making more that is free and that everyone can tap into, you can think about how you can make your free work more easily accessible and consumable from people. And that can look like having a public podcast, having some long form content where you're able to go a little bit deeper, YouTube videos, whatever calls you the most. So I think that that is enough value for people who really want to get started in this work. Going through those comments is already a lot of value for people who are just learning. And it's going to also weed out the people who don't really want to make an investment to deepen their learning here. But you also have people who do want to deepen their investment here, and that is where you can begin to charge people. So first, how does all of this sound?
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I think it's very easy to be like more needs to be free in this era of like it's so easy to access TikTok and free things that I've sort of convinced myself that that's bare minimum. But that's just not true. That is like so much work that I'm putting in and that I've given to people for free. And also, I have already been told by people that they would pay for things I do. People ask me constantly, do you have a Patreon? I mean, I have a Substack that I don't really update, has, 1,000 subscribers just from people who follow me on TikTok. And I've had 3 or 4 people who pledge money. You can like pledge money ahead of time on Substack if the creator decides to put on paid subscriptions. And I'm like, okay, if that's not proof enough that there are people who not only are interested in going deeper, but want to compensate me for that, then I am my own biggest obstacle. And
Yeah.
thinking about if I had 10 people who paid $50, a flat $50 to just XYZ, whatever I decide to do, like, I really don't. I think for me, what is more important is doing the thing, proving the value to me and to others, putting money behind it, then making X number of dollars. And I want I want to be careful not to be like, what I was saying before, like $1, it doesn't matter. So I want to be both conscious of that and also allow for this to not, the pressure, the most important priority to not be making X amount of money. Right? Like, is it setting some sort of number that is lower than a full-time salary that I want to make? Or, just sort of like, there's so many things in tension at once in my head, but the need is there and the value is clearly there from other people. So
One thing that feels important to say is that not all labor, even though this is your labor, this is your life's work, you're already doing it for free. You would do this even if even if no one was in the room, and you likely are over delivering, and you will continue to over deliver when you put a price tag onto something, because that is the standard you have for yourself, and that has consistently been how you've treated your content to date. And I'm not saying this to like talk you out of anything you just said, but to just say, like, if you're worried about giving people value, people could probably have a college course off of the work that you've already done,
yeah,
at
that
least one.
has, has
So
yeah.
when it comes to having a business, it's important to recognize that something like a Substack, something like a newsletter that you charge $5, $10 a month, something like that can consistently cover your base expenses. So that if you have 1,000 people there, I mean, honestly, if you have 1,000 people paying you $10 a month, that is your income goal for the most part. Like, you can do that, and people do that. There are business models that operate off of that, and that can be a leg of your business. Part of this is capacity building for the collective to have critical conversations. That can be a vehicle of it. You can have a monthly chit chat with just that group if you like to. Like, there are ways that you can make this, or pop up chit chats with that group too. So there are ways that you can make that more valuable. But I think as a leg, having something that doesn't require much of you, as something that a lot of people can hop into and join and leave when they're no longer receiving value, that is a really powerful offering that you already have at your fingertips.
No, I'm thinking about that. Like, right. I think in my head, it's like, it has to be the thing. Like, I'm waiting for the thing, but it's like, okay, I already have the tools. I could just quickly turn on my Substack and say, hey, I'm going to start. I don't know. It feels like the barriers to like, what's the thing that is worth it? And how am I going to outline that? And everything has to be already set in stone, locked in, easily explainable, very transparent to people. But it's like, how can I say, I'm going to try it. We're going to develop it as we charge. And, like, obviously I want the value to be clear to people before they pay, but how do I not over index on like spending so much time trying to clarify that and structure out a really formal program and all these things? Like, how to acknowledge that I already have the tools, and that the people who find them valuable will probably already understand the value I can continue to provide.
I would like you to look at your audience with a lens of generosity and assume that people already want to go deeper, but just don't really know how to.
Oh, okay.
And going deeper is going to require a little bit more work from you, which is okay for you to be
I'm writing this down. They want to go deeper, but don't know how.
paid.
Okay. In the lens of generosity, you're so right. Because actually, it kind of reminds me of something that I've talked a lot about, small favors with friends. And I heard on a podcast, I've talked about this on TikTok too, how one friend asks, "Hey, can I bring you anything from the store?" This is at the beginning of COVID. And the friend was like, her instinct was to say, no, I don't want to bother you. But that friend had asked. And so she says, I'm going to challenge myself. I'm going to ask her to bring me salt. And then she asks, and then the friend comes, and, she was really nervous about the friend had to drive out of her way to bring her salt, all this and that. And then the friend drops it off, and she looks, and the friend is like beaming, is so happy to have done that favor for that friend, the one who was reticent to ask. And I think about that all the time. Like, how much are we limiting people's ability to do us favors, or by underestimating? And so you're framing it as, I need to look at them with a level of generosity. Like, in what way is my attempt at humility or at like nervousness about charging or undervaluing actually depriving them the ability to contribute or to value me with money or to support me and whatever, right? Like, that reframe of, in my attempts to be generous, to be accessible, I'm actually like not giving them, it's not a good faith read on them in some ways.
Mm-hmm. Because
Yeah.
it's not them, it's your projections of them, and that's a different thing. When the reality is your people, especially on platforms like TikTok, are more likely to be like you. And would you pay for someone who spent 5 hours on a curated newsletter that goes out once a month, right? Like, would you pay if you trusted that
I
person's vision
literally
and voice?
do
Yeah.
that. I literally,
Okay, cool.
why don't I think I do that to a
Uh,
friend I have? Here's the thing, I don't even really read this one friend's newsletter, but I pay the $5 a month because she makes good stuff. I occasionally skim it. She deserves it in my mind. She's putting good work. I want to support her. And then there are the people that I pay for that I don't know, that I actually read cover to cover. And then that's also worth it to me. And I'm like, oh my God, why don't I think that I could do that? And that people would treat me the way that I treat them. Boy,
yeah.
the projections,
They-
it's like blowing.
yeah. But I mean, so it's this part of you that's, afraid to have this be a legitimate thing, because we
Yes.
kind of like struggle in our lives. And if we earn it by, making $10,000 a year and like not, we have this belief that it has to be that way when it really doesn't. Um, so I would recommend that being one part of your work. And you already have purchased this. You also already know what you love about doing this and creating these resources and bringing them all together. In between those two components, that's your marketing and sales page.
Mm.
You can just put that all in a doc and then make it pretty and then put a price tag on it. Don't charge $1 to $2. At least do like 5 to 10. You gotta pay taxes. It's.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say like, Miriam, charge $10, but I don't wanna like at least charge $10. I've seen your work.
That's 30% of that to taxes. Like, what, $5? Okay, I'm gonna get like,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, $10. Charge $10. um, and then see how it feels. See if it is something that you're still excited to show up for. If you're not excited to show up for it, you can play with the price, you can play with how you're delivering it, but think about in general for this leg of your work, how can you build capacity for the most people to intellectually be in the loop and have these more nuanced conversations.
I really like your framing of build collective capacity. I have never thought about it like that, but I think that is what I'm doing. Because I think I've been thinking about it as like facilitating people to be introspective, but there's this idea of like building capacity within us and as a collective to, I think you said this, facilitate change and to understand ourselves better so that we show up better in the world and we treat each other better, and like thinking of it as a collective and as capacity building formalizes it in a way that resonates and that doesn't feel fake, but also feels slightly more formal than I'm just curating a list of my favorite things. Like that's not what I'm doing here. There's something deeper in the way that I pick the things, the intentionality with which I frame them. Like that is going somewhere and is doing something impactful. And that language really resonates with me. So thank you for sort of just seeing that and understanding it and just continuing to reiterate it multiple times in this conversation. Because I'm like, yeah, you're right. I am building capacity here to facilitate change. Like that's just it. And it's not an ego thing. It's just like, that's what's happening.
Yeah. It's okay. The more you say, you'll begin to say it with your chest. I promise. Yeah, just say it more. It's okay.
Really, I taught my Arabic teacher today in class, fake it till you make it. I have no idea what it is in Arabic, but I was like, I need to teach you in English because this is the thing that I am constantly doing is just faking it a little bit and then it starts to feel right and crystallize. And so I feel like this is a very crystallizing conversation for me that also doesn't feel fake.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the second part of this is the audience that you're going through the mud with. And this, the mud is the mud. So you can define what that is. But what I'll say is when it comes to these experiences, you really have to understand one, how much time you're putting into creating a space that is thoughtful and that can really hold people well. And then two, how much time you're spending with people. And then three, the emotional toll that that time is taken. So I think especially you have a nonprofit background, at least partially. So we're kind of taught that we have to be endless giving machines, like, and the reality is for you to show up for your best, like as your best for this space, what exactly do you need to have in place? And that is going to inform your pricing. So if you need an hour-long massage appointment, 5 hours each week to do to do the content curation, resources, materials, 2 hours a week to like respond to comments, and then 3 hours a week to be on a live call, like all of that is factored into the price.
Oh my God, I do not think like that. That is crazy to me to think, but you're right. Like I only think about time creating or communicating as the work. But then I get into a situation where I spend time finding, reading, writing, whatever it is, and that becomes laborious or dreadful because I haven't seen that as like a key part of the process. And so I just sort of assume that that's like a casualty of the main thing. But you're right, that is like part and parcel of the whole thing. And I have totally been seeing that as like the periphery, which is not right.
Yeah. And so, like, I think that that number is an important number to keep in mind. The other number that's important to keep in mind is the value of not having this, right? And like what the value of the actual offering is. So if we're using, hey, let's bring people together for Thanksgiving dinner, let's like, I don't want to fight my relatives for Thanksgiving. Let's have a week up to Thanksgiving, conversation, daily meeting sessions, right? What is the overall value that that space provides to that person? So what does it mean for you to not have a big blowout when it comes to Thanksgiving? What is that value to you? What does that do for your mental health? What does that do for your emotional health? What does that do for your financial well-being? Maybe you're living with your parents. Maybe you're, financially tied with family members. What does that mean for the way that you view yourself? If you have an outburst that you couldn't control or that you feel bad about, like you can begin to ask these questions to understand what the value is, both financially and non-financially, to another person. And that also needs to inform how you price. And
Yeah. So it's like essentially I will have to take all this stuff into account as best I can at the beginning. And I have no issue with this. This is very comfortable for me, like have sort of these open conversations after X amount of time or whatever about has this been worth the value? Is this financially difficult to, like continuing to be communicative with the people who've chosen to pay, or maybe the people who were reticent to pay? Like I could even inquire about that. And like, I like the idea of co-developing it with people. Yeah. Because of course I can't predict like what being able to survive the Thanksgiving dinner table what that's worth to a rando, right? Like that's hard to sort of anticipate. So there is kind of like I pick a number the best that I can, honestly and generously, but also honoring myself, and then we can take it from there basically and add on or take away as I see how much work it is and how much value it's providing, and I hear from people. Um, does that feel like an approach that is not because that is flexible and open, but also firm, if that makes sense?
What I will say is that when you look at the value you're providing for someone, you usually, and you really are actually looking at that value, 9 times out of 10, you're going to want to increase the costs. And I'm not saying this as a bad thing. Like, you need to have a livelihood. You also deserve to have a life that you enjoy. And the thing is that people see the value in it or else they won't pay it. Now, when
Yeah.
it comes to making things accessible, I think that there are lots of ways that that can happen. There can be payment plans. There can be random acts. I mean, I don't do like, I think there's been a huge push, and I think I talked about this a few times, but like, there's been a huge push on people making everything sliding scale and everything XYZ affordable and everything, blah, 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 blah. And I personally don't necessarily believe in that. I
Mm,
think for, ad hoc things, if you want to do something that's like, all money is donated to XYZ charity and like fundraise. Like, I think those types of things, I see the value, but I think that your people need to be able to lead themselves a little bit into the spaces that you're creating. And to make the barrier of entry absolutely zero does a little bit of a disservice to people who know that they want to invest, know that they're ready to invest in you.
ooh,
And not only that, but a lot of times people don't treat, and I don't say this for everyone, but like for some people, they really do treat things differently if they don't pay for them. And I'm not saying this
yes, like
like,
not showing up if something
ex-
is free or bailing or whatever. Yeah. I mean, I do that.
I mean, I've done that. That's what I was about to say. Like, I'm not saying this as a
For an
judgment
event.
call.
You're gonna see me at that event because I dropped
Exactly.
$25. Yeah, no, I think
Exactly.
I think you're right that like and this I will be very interested to see how it goes. Like how can I keep up my TikTok if I also build this paid community, right? But capacity wise, I mean, because that to me really alleviates some of my concern, or I have suddenly gatekeeped all of my material, all of my voice, all of my offerings. Like I don't want to do that. The ideal I think would be to maintain this sort of free and accessible page that is of really good quality, as we've been discussing for the last 2 hours. And also, if you have the resources and the interest and see this as valuable, you can charge more. And if I believe that if someone really wanted to join, I mean, we did this with No Small Talk, or the Conversation Club, me and my co-facilitator, we sort of put, we are trying, we want to charge X amount, and here's what you get for that and why we believe it's worth it. Please state, like on our application form, please write if you can pay that, or if you can pay less, please explain what explain your financial hardship a little bit more. This will not be a barrier to entry, but sort of creating a little bit of friction there of you not have to explain yourself, but you really have to think like a couple people, only a couple, I was expecting a lot more, said, I'm a student, I'm this, I'm that, like gonna need some sort of discount but really want to join, and it was very clear that they were just serious, and it was obviously worth it for us to make that concession. It wasn't even a concession, it was whatever. And so I can see a world where the people who really don't want to pay, they can follow for free. The people who are willing to pay the full amount can pay, and if there are people who can't pay but really want to join, I have to imagine they will say something to me, and then I can decide what I want to do with that. But odds are I would do some sort of lower thing instead of, I think the opposite is start with the sliding scale, start with the low prices, like start with whatever I need, and also make room for those. I mean, it puts the onus on the person to articulate their own hardship, which is can be
Yeah.
uncomfortable and cannot be the right way. And so that's where I get a little iffy on that. But I think my language could that's where I think like clear, empathetic, communicative language is important in explaining that. Like, if this is something that you really see as valuable, but you can't pay this thing, please reach out. Like, I don't know. There are ways that don't put people on the spot, but do make people stop and think about how much they're valuing it. I don't know if any of that
I
makes
mean,
sense. But
yeah. I mean, so what I What I will say is like I care more about making sure people feel really good about themselves, and I care about making sure people make the right financial decisions for them. And so the way that my offers are set up is you can either walk to values aligned income stream, you can take a train to values aligned income stream, or you can take a private jet with me to values aligned income stream. Those are the three types of offers I have. And
Right.
when I launch a new offer, it's kind of like, or you can, watch on TikTok, which is like you're walking, but you're kind of getting distracted on the way. You're gonna get there eventually, maybe, maybe not, but like those are the four ways I engage with people. And what I also do too is, I'm relaunching a group coaching program that's like only 25 people can join. We're going to be creating a values aligned income stream over the course of a year. And the way that I have that offer set up is that the sooner you purchase, the more bonuses you get. So, right now the bonus is you save 60% of the cost and you get like 5 hours, 6 hours of like free coaching with me, right? Like I just try to make it as fun as possible. And you're not having a lesser experience by waiting, but if you are like really rocky with me, if you're on my email list, if you're like staying plugged into my work, you can join in for not that much money. But if you do wait, and if you're like, oh, I don't know about this person, I don't know about XYZ, I don't know if this is a good fit for me, then you can pay what everyone else is going to pay in the future for years and years and years to come. And that's not a disservice to you, and that's not a disservice to anyone else. But I love to reward people who already are rocking with me. I got that from the Telfar Bags guy, Brandon Blackwell, because that's what he does. He had like a launch based off of that, and that's where I kind of said, yeah, like I really want to reward people who are really on board with me. And that's what I care about as a business owner. I don't really care as much about sliding scale because I know you're going to get there. But if you want to get there faster with more privileges, then that's okay too. Let's make it easy at first, and then if you dilly dally, then you can pay what everyone else is paying, and that's not a bad thing.
Okay. Yep. I love that. I think the speed at which you'll get there is really that framing makes a lot of sense to me. This idea of like you will facilitate everyone getting there. You're not limiting people's ability to get to the final destination, but how fast, how circuitous, how direct, like all of that depends on how much they will value you with the money or how much they're willing to put in. And it is kind of a self-selecting crew. Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like my one-on-one coaching, it's expensive. I know it's expensive. I have payment plans so you can pay it out in 12 months, 24 months, whatever you need. But at the same time, like I know I also am pouring hours and hours and hours in to you, looking at your business, looking at things that you share to me, reading your concerns, having ad hoc calls if I feel like it's necessary. I'm an overgiver. And I price like an overgiver because if I don't, then I won't be able to survive, right?
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's just weaved into my business model.
Yeah. And I wrote your direct quote down. You were likely over delivering for me. I'm like, oh wow, hadn't considered that. But yeah, I think that's right.
So
No, but you've just given me so much to think about, and I really am so grateful for your generosity. There's so much in here. So yeah, I just appreciate you so much, and thank you so much for giving me this resource.
of course, do you have any other questions before we kind of close?
No, I think I have a ton of stuff that I need to like synthesize.
You
This
got some
is
work to do.
I know. This is such good marching orders. And it really is. Like I said, I think before we started recording, or maybe at the top, like I feel like this new year energy, I want to create something bigger, community build in that way. I feel like this is just so aligned with how to actually start doing that. So, thank you.
Of course. Thank you so much for joining.
I hope you had so much fun listening to that episode. I know we had a lot of fun recording it. If you'd like to plug into Miriam's work, you can below in the show notes. Her Instagram and TikTok are at Miriam_Tinney, and you can also find information on how to apply to No Small Talk below too. If you would like to schedule your own professional liberation breakthrough session, there's information on how to do that below too. Now these are pretty time-intensive services for me, so you can get them at a first come, first serve basis, but there's all the information you need to reserve your spots below. I hope you have a beautiful day, and I'll talk to you soon.